So good morning, and thanks to everybody for coming out so early. We're taking a little advantage of the fact we're on Pacific time and hope that some of you who have come from the East are still a little bit on East Coast time or Central time or something like that, but we really appreciate your coming early because we wanted to take a little time before we start our formal agenda and ask Alan Kamer and Ann Goodrich of Humedica to talk about a couple of things that I think are on everybody's mind. We've had lots of very positive developments since the last collaborative meeting. One being Humedica becoming part of Optum Insight. So Alan's going to talk a little bit about that. And the other thing is that Alan and Ann have been working on other opportunities that could be available to you, and how even though AMGA has had lots of history with sponsorship of by industry of our collaboratives, we haven't done that with the Anseta Collaborative because obviously there's a lot of data here that we're talking about, and it's sort of sensitive. So I think the question of how we approach industry and the opportunities that present themselves for benefit from industry are really very, very broad and a little bit different now that we have this data resource, which is really quite unique in the industry. So Alan and Ann have been doing some thinking about that. I know some of you are already working with some performance improvement CME opportunities that this has opened up. But that would be the thing we want to talk about in a little more generality and get some input from you about how to go forward with that. So, Alan, thank you for agreeing to do this.
Thank you, John, and good morning to everyone. Did everyone have a nice time at dinner last night? Excellent. I'd like to thank Mary Lanton and her team for arranging those dinners and making sure that we were all well fed. As one of the co-founders of Humedica, it's just really exciting. I say this every collaborative. Each time I stand up here and see the room grow, the number of faces grow, as well as familiar faces, but it's just really outstanding to see how much progress has been made and really to dive into how providers, all of yourselves, are using data if you're live on the platform, and some of the change that is going on in the healthcare system. And what's really exciting for those of you that are new to the collaborative is you have a chance here to really interact with your colleagues, learn from them, ask questions, take home knowledge that you wouldn't otherwise have, ideas, concepts, and really help shape new activities, new approaches to things back at your own organization. So it's just great to be here, and thank you all for coming and participating. So this morning, first I'm going to give you a quick update about Humedica and Optum. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, I will go through some of the background on Optum and tell you about what we're up to since the acquisition. We're going to talk to you about really what's going on in terms of some of the inbound requests we're getting from a variety of folks and some of the opportunities we see for provider organizations. We're going to lay out how we believe this can evolve into a vision that is driven by providers rather than vice versa. And then talk about some of the ongoing activities that John mentioned. Many of you are participating in those already around CME. And then open it up for some questions and interaction. So Humedica was acquired towards the end of January by the United Health Group, which owns United Healthcare and Optum. And as background, United Healthcare is a Fortune 22 company. It's the largest insurer in the country. And United Healthcare, United Health Group is divided into two businesses, United Healthcare, which is the insurer, and then Optum. Humedica is part of Optum. There is a firewall and division between the organizations, so contracts that you all have with Humedica are kept with Humedica and are honored within those organizations. Identifiable data, information is not shared back to United Healthcare, so I want to make that very clear up front. Optum is an organization that has focused on really helping to make the healthcare system work better by a few different ways. There's Optum Insight, which is the data and analytics, formerly known as Ingenix, and that's where Humedica falls into. Bill Miller is the CEO of Optum Insight, and our company and our CEO, Michael Weintraub, report up to Bill Miller. Optum Health is an organization that provides everything from behavioral management programs to other insurers, disease management programs, health savings accounts. They work with employers, payers, and the like. And then third is Optum Rx, which is one of the nation's largest PBMs. All in, those divisions, and here's some more detail about them, account for about $35 billion in revenue, with Optum Health and Optum Rx being roughly equal, around $14–15 billion, and Optum Insight the remainder. So that's background of who Optum is and what they do. What's very important to understand is Optum works with the entire healthcare system. There are over 80,000 physician practices, 5,000 hospitals, 300 other insurers besides United Healthcare who are customers of the data, the analytics, the programs, the activities. So our healthcare system has evolved so dramatically over the last decade. Just want everyone to understand how significant a footprint Optum has and how many things are being offered to patients, providers, and other organizations responsible for healthcare delivery. So Optum itself was founded in 1996. It has more than 35,000 people. Again, the revenue was slightly under $30 billion in 2012, and that's expected to grow about 10 to 15% in the coming year. And there are offices in many major cities across North America: Boston, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Raleigh, North Carolina, et cetera, and in many other parts of the world. So what are some of the things you might care about, what Optum does and has in terms of capabilities for providers? So this is a slide that talks about the journey that many providers are on in terms of ultimately evolving from just providing care to managing health. And Optum has a whole slew of offerings ranging from financial and clinical analytics and population health management, which we now fall under, to care delivery, coding and documentation, medical necessity, and patient access. And again, I'm not up here today to give you a commercial about all of Optum's products and offerings and what have you. I'm just trying to give you a broad overview of all the areas in which they provide products and services to the provider market. So what does it mean, Humedica and Optum? So what we're focused on, one of the big opportunities we all see from this is something that many of you all have been asking for quite some time, and that's the integration of claims data with clinical data. Being able to have all of the depth that we provide with clinical information alongside the financial cost information. So I think I'll skip some of the Humedica key competencies because many of you are aware from them, but as far as Optum goes, Optum manages claims data for a number of different organizations. What's very important is they also offer risk grouping, bundling, and actuarial risk stratification. Those are going to be more and more important capabilities as you become or are ACOs and you're managing more and more risk. They look at things like leakage analyses, evidence-based care planning and coordination. So these are a number of different capabilities that they have that we're going to be ultimately integrating with the deep clinical expertise and information that we offer. And this picture just lays out some of where they are in the broad-based activities of claims, some of the deep clinical information we have, and then how we're going to focus on taking the knowledge and turning it into action. And For those of you that aren't quite certain yet, though I doubt many of you are not, having clinical and claims together allows for really deep financial information that's timely, that allows you to intervene while before more severe or more costly information comes together, with very relevant clinical metrics about how sick the patients are and what other care longitudinally those patients might have. So we are focused right now of doing the hard work, and what I mean by that is we are going through an inventory of what the product pipeline and planning processes were for Optum, as well as what they were for ourselves, where there is overlap, where there are synergies, where there are things that neither of us have that we were going to build. And we expect to be back in front of you around IQL time with much more significant details around what will be next and how we plan to integrate things and what sort of product roadmap there will be. So that, again, at a high level is where we are. Again, the acquisition was the end of January. We're roughly 90 days in. We're still meeting many new people and learning lots as they are as well. And I call this the education phase, and we are definitely in the education phase. And over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll start to put some more meat on the bones. But just wanted to give you a quick backdrop and overview of Humedica and what we're planning with Optum. So jumping in, the next part of the talk is really going to focus on some of the opportunities to work more collaboratively. Needless to say, the opportunities surrounding providers having access to this type of information and detailed information are endless. And what we want to understand from all of you is which opportunities you're most interested in, and give you some thoughts on how to take these data and take this information and empower your organizations to do things you might not thought necessarily feasible or possible historically. So we've been working very closely with Anseta really since the outset. As part of the vision for all this was, once the data were accessible, there would be an awful lot of things that could be done on behalf of providers. And we've had lots of requests coming through to us. For those of you who are not aware, Humedica, in addition to our provider business, has other businesses, a life sciences business where we work with de-identified data, and life sciences companies on the commercial side are looking at disease-specific models and information about how patients are being treated at a population health level. Again, we have a very strict and important set of data use principles that we've developed with the AMGA and Anseta and all of your organizations that protect the data very carefully. We also are doing a number of things around research and everything from getting information published on the data to driving education opportunities. We've had lots of requests both from providers as well as from life sciences companies, research organizations, academic organizations, contract research organizations, et cetera, to do a whole slew of other things. What we've attempted to do is lay out some of the broad categories that are coming our way and talk to you about what some of those are. So the first one at the top left is continuing medical education. There's a type of that called performance improvement CME. We actually have a number of these projects underway. Ann Goodrich at Humedica has been spearheading these and working with several of you out in the audience and other provider groups. She's going to talk about some of those in greater detail, but essentially it's an opportunity to lay out where there are unmet needs around education, to look at baseline data that identify problems or undertreated or underdiagnosed or what have you, and then to provide education to physicians within your organization without having to do the traditional heavy lifting of manually pulling records and entering data and so forth, and getting folks educated where there are gaps. And ultimately, that should improve outcomes and quality. There have been a number of market research opportunities. We did a project with a CRO with us, ANSETA, and several of the groups where they looked at adherence to prescribing guidelines around hypertension, the JNC7 guidelines, and then did qualitative interviews with a number of provider organizations sharing data of the analyses that were found and getting a sense of why organizations were more or less compliant with those guidelines. And there are lots of interesting learnings. Again, there's going to be a publication coming out of that. We've had a lot of requests to bring programs to you from provider organizations saying, hey, we're overburdened with patients of a certain type. Are there programs or activities or things that you're aware of that could be helpful? And vice versa, where organizations that are funding these disease management programs looking for test beds, if you will, to take initiatives that they've developed that are either brand agnostic or disease focused and bring those additional resources and interventions. And some of those were around comparative effectiveness research and government grants, and others have come from industry. And finally, another area that we've had a great deal of interest have been around clinical trial services, where both provider organizations have come to us saying, we'd like to do more clinical trials. We now have data that can help us identify patients that might meet certain study criteria. And on the flip side, we've had CROs, we've had life sciences companies, et cetera, saying, now that you have this large database where we're looking for patients that meet certain inclusion and exclusion criteria, we'd love to sit down and talk with some particular providers or organizations that have patients that fall into those areas. So each of these, we believe, represents value to your organizations. We're not chasing opportunities. These are things that are coming to us and to ANSETA. And what's more important is we're weeding out things that we don't believe add value to medical groups or provider organizations, and instead want to bring you things that ultimately all have an underlying value proposition to you that improve quality of care, in many cases bring forward new information and research that is extremely valuable to the improvement of patient outcomes. And oftentimes these opportunities bring new revenue opportunities to your organizations, whether it's a stipend for a researcher to help participate in the project, or obviously in a clinical trial project or a disease management program. It can be everything from new resources to payment to your physicians to CME credits that they all need to get to stay up to their licensure. So in today's world, we bring you the opportunities after the phone comes in and we vet them, and we in ANSETA reach out and say on a group-by-group basis, hey, we have something in this disease area, whether it's diabetes or cardiovascular risk, what have you. We contact you, we say, is there a level of interest in participating in this study or program? All of this is opt-in. We're not requiring anyone to participate in these programs. We're not out there marketing that group X, Y, and Z has done these 7 programs and will do these in the future. It's really on an ad hoc basis, if you will. Only after you opt in do we then let a provider organization or an academic or a funder of the research let them know, if appropriate, that there's an interest. What we'd like to do and evolve this to your benefit would be really to collaborate together and create an opt-in provider network that is pre-built, if you will. We want to understand what opportunities your organization really is most interested in pursuing, or among a variety of opportunities. We want to understand, are there particular clinical or disease areas that might be of interest because you either have existing research there. We want to use the data. As you're going to see today, and you've seen at other collaboratives, there are very significant differences in everything from prescribing patterns to procedures to use of medical E&M visits to a variety of things to identify where there might be really valuable opportunities for your organization to have funded programs come your way. So we want to work with your data, with your permission, to prospectively identify where you might need some further education compared to your peers, where you might be trending downward and there might be an opportunity for a program to be brought to you so you can address that need. So Humedica and Anseta want to really understand all this from you and turn the model on its head. Rather than, again, on an ad hoc basis, having things come through the door to us or to Anseta and then us going one by one and trying to gauge interest. We want to know in advance what types of things you want to do and then work with you to help set up an ongoing stream of activity and opportunities. And by the rate and pace of which we're getting contacted, both us and Anseta, we think this could be extremely beneficial to each of your organizations. And then you can see below some of the examples are education, some are research around adherence, some are disease management programs or opportunities, some of them are clinical trials. And again, we don't expect all of you to sign up for every area or every disease or for elements of this program, but based on the reaction we've gotten to date from each of the organizations, we think several of you will be interested in several of the opportunities. So what we are proposing to do and plan to do following this meeting is we're going to send a survey out to each of the group to confirm your interest and willingness to participate by both opportunity type, clinical areas of interest, specialty composition. Are there particular specialists that you might find are getting involved? And then we're going to collect other information that you'd be willing to share. Are there things on this list that you think should be added, that you've had inquiries from, or you'd like to collaborate with your peers? Again, this is about collaboration and working together with your colleagues. There may be things that you'd like to drive. I can tell you from the government side, where we've participated in a number of grants, there are some significant opportunities to have initiatives funded that would look to address concerns you all might have in terms of being able to meet the demands of the patients based on the reimbursement model. In fact, our colleague Linda Kloss was talking last night during the cocktail hour about there might be a really nice opportunity to study the differentiation between reimbursement methods and how care is being delivered and the outcomes being achieved by that. And again, there are lots of people looking at these types of things right now, lots of organizations concerned, payers, the government, life sciences companies, foundations, and we just think it's a great time to start thinking more significantly and collaborating together so we're in the driver's seat rather than having these opportunities filtered at you. I'm going to turn it over to Ann now to talk a little bit about the CME programs we have underway that we and Anseta have been working with many of you around, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Thanks for being here with us this morning. So Alan did a great overview, sort of high level of this approach in general and the different types and ranges of opportunities that we're hoping to do more of with you in a very collaborative way. Some of you already know that we've got a number of projects underway in the CME space specifically, so I'm going to expand upon that part of what we're doing today and some of the specific examples and sort of the approach in general. But I did want to pause for a moment first just to sort of reflect on CME for a moment. My background prior to coming to Humedica about a year ago was at an organization called Pri-Med, which is one of the largest continuing medical education companies around the country. And so I'm very familiar with the CME space. One of the things that I did there was a lot of physician research around CME and trying to better understand their needs and their preferences and really how they look at CME. And I want to sort of dispel a myth that it's not, from my understanding, and this is some research that a company called Global Education did last year, really reporting out that physicians truly do as lifelong learners, they really value actually the information and the knowledge that CME does bring to them. It's a credible third-party source of information that they need to get. It's not just, sort of the stick, the carrot in it, is it that they are actually able to use the information to make better, more informed decisions about their patient care. Some examples being cited here around more efficient diagnosis and screening and use of, risk evaluation tools, better managing their patients, adherence to treatment regimens, getting updated on new and emerging therapies that they might otherwise, feel as though they're falling behind on because the information that they need to have is overwhelming at times. It's like having your mouth to a fire hose, I guess. And the other thing to point out is that they are really consuming CME at rapid rates. And with the explosion of online and digital CME in the past few years, we know that they're far exceeding oftentimes the average credit requirements that are needed of them, which I think is just another example of, again, the value that CME plays. So we believe there's a real opportunity for us to collaborate with, credible third-party academic and other education partners to really advance new models of CME. So we know that physicians are getting CME at rapid rates and high volumes, and we know that they value that information can bring to them to make better, more informed decisions with regards to their patient care. How can we think about revolutionizing CME in a way, given what we have at Humedica and with Anseta, which is access to the actual clinical performance data and the ability to link that data to the physician learners themselves with, obviously, opt-in and collaboration from the provider organizations as the source of that data. And so this is sort of an example, kind of the model here in the visual is how we can go about doing that. Some of you are familiar with performance improvement CME, which is an AMA-certified type of CME that they brought about, I think, in 2007 or so, which in theory is spot on, right? Which is bring the physicians in at the start of any kind of educational curriculum, allow them to self-assess their data in terms of relevant clinical performance measures aligned to a set of learning objectives, whatever the clinical area of focus is. It might be around, LDL, screening might be around A1Cs, et cetera. Let them look at their data and self-assess where they are as compared to their peers, and then go and develop an action plan for themselves and participate in a set of educational interventions designed to address those gaps in care and variations in care. And then at a period of time later, come back and self-reflect on their data again and see whether or not they've been able to improve upon those key performance measures or patient outcomes measures. So in theory, the AMA was right. This is exactly the way that CME should be brought about, where it is more personalized and the data is powering new models. But historically, the model itself and the approach has really fallen down because the participation rates have been low. It's huge burden on the physicians to go and collect this data or have others in their offices collect the data for them. Oftentimes we're talking about 15 to 20 chart audits at a time, and so the data is not always representative, it's not complete, and there's all sorts of other kind of flaws with it. We believe we have an opportunity to actually help power those models so that it can be, with the more streamlined data collection processes, much more impactful. And we need to do that, obviously, working with third-party partners who truly understand good, solid principles of adult learning so that they can bring about interventions that are really designed to impart changes. But we believe that the data is a critical piece of that. So this is an example. Some of you are, I think, already familiar with a company called Real CME out in New York, actually, that I know many of you have spoken to. They have a very well-established educational learning platform, if you will, where they can take the learners to a designated portal. And in the case of how we can work together with them, I used Aurora Healthcare just as an example here. They are, in fact, participating in one of the Jocelyn programs that is underway right now. And this is really just illustrative of things that we can do moving forward with a platform in collaboration with this company called Real CME, whereby a couple things to call out. first of all, there is the opportunity to have provider-specific branding, so it can really feel like an extension of the provider organization that's enrolling their physicians to participate in the curriculum. We have the opportunity to, again, bring the data in an automated way to the portal so the physicians aren't going and collecting any data themselves. The moment they come in to start participating in an educational curriculum, they're able to see Stage A, which is the starting point of any one of these PICME programs, where they stand as compared to their peers within their broader provider group and as compared to that national benchmark, which may be defined by, NCQA standards, or it may be defined by the Humedica benchmark, which we know we're able to build with the data. So being able to self-reflect where they are against their peers as a starting point, and then after they've established their goals for themselves and after they've participated in a set of educational activities, coming back in, it's demonstrated here by Stage C, and looking at, with respect to the key measures, A1C levels less than 8, blood pressure less than 120, how have they been able to improve against those key process measures or patient outcomes measures. And then also looking at the self-reported outcomes data. Most CME activities have pre and post self-reported surveys that go along with them, and no one's ever really looked at the results from those self-reported outcomes data and kind of integrated that with the actual clinical data to roll it up into an aggregated summary of findings or report. And those are the types of ways in which we're talking about building the actual curriculum with our partners and sharing data back with you all as the provider organizations participating. So many of you know this already because I've talked to some of you, or I've talked to some of your colleagues about sort of what's involved, and this is really a typical kind of scenario when you think about what are the benefits to participate and when you think about what's the time commitments. Those are the big questions everybody's asking, right? So starting at the provider level, at the organizational level first, we believe, and this is actually validated by a lot of conversations that we've had with many of you, that this is really beneficial for the organization in a few ways. First of all, it's a way to optimize the data assets that we already have. Something to point out here is we're able to build these kinds of programs in areas of unmet need, not just in diabetes and COPD and CHF and other kind of modules that are already within Mindshare, but also in areas like hepatitis C and pain management and stroke prevention and other areas that are not necessarily in Mindshare, because we do have that electronic health record data from you all already, and it's just another way for us to think about using it and building educational programs. We believe, and we have heard from you, that there's added value in bringing these kinds of programs and opportunities in a new and unique way back to the physicians. There's publication plans for any one of these programs, working with folks like Jocelyn and University of Cincinnati and Duke and others. For any one of these initiatives, they're interested in reporting back out the findings, all de-identified obviously, but sharing that information out so that the industry can learn from the findings and improve upon, from a CME perspective, what interventions work well, what don't work as well, and how do we evolve and how do we improve upon what's been built. So having acknowledgement in any of those publications. I put accreditation up here also because a number of organizations already have CME divisions. And many of those CME divisions are serving as accredited providers. And so what's interesting in the conversations I've had with some of your groups there is that the Accreditation Council for CME, the ACCME, has gotten incredibly stringent over the past 5 or so years with the requirements to actually maintain that certification as an accredited provider. And one of the things that they're asking for is more rich patient-level data to evaluate the impact of these CME programs. And so we're able to collaborate on the front end with your organizations and let them be the accredited provider on any of these programs to the extent that that's of interest as well. And that may be to educate your own physicians. It may be to do a national program with other providers in our network, depending on, again, the size and scope of the CME divisions and their willingness to work with us in that way. We're happy to have those discussions. There's also, because these programs are all funded through educational grants, there's also a stipend allocated as a line item in any of the grants for participating provider organizations. So for these programs, there's, on average about $1,500 set aside to really cover any administrative time to help facilitate the programs as they're being implemented. But to that end, we don't anticipate that there is a lot of time required from the provider organizations to participate in these programs. In fact, we've intentionally tried to set this up so that there is minimal burden on your end. And really, it's about, maybe 4 or so hours over the course of the year, which is, kicking things off on the front end, making sure everybody's, aligned with the goals of the educational program, providing the consent for us to work with the data and share the data out with Jocelyn or another third party that we're working with, getting the contact list from you so that we can go ahead and enroll the physicians and then start bringing them into the program. It's not a requirement. Nobody's making it a requirement for the physicians. It's obviously optional, but we need to make sure that we have all the lists of the right folks for any given program so that we can enroll them and then start to coordinate with them directly to keep them engaged throughout the different educational activities. From a physician's perspective, on average, depending on the educational design and the size and scope of the program, it's about 3 to 5 hours. Most of these programs are done through the online portal, the example of which I showed previously, with a different set of resource tools, patient education materials, checklists, reminders, patient case vignettes, where you're actually, in a very interactive way, taking the physicians online through an actual simulated case scenario and asking them questions about how they would respond to a given practice scenario, and using that as an educational tool. So altogether, about 3, 4, 5 hours of educational time for which they're getting 20 plus CME credits to participate. And it's complementary for them. So oftentimes there's CME initiatives that the physicians need to pay out of pocket for, but all of these would be complementary. And then the other thing that has come up a lot, and I know there's a lot of interest from many of the provider groups and the physicians themselves, is how does this then tie into maintenance of certification, which is also something that's gotten much more stringent for the physicians over the years, Part 4 maintenance of certification from the boards. And one of the things that we've talked to the initial partners about and will plan to do more of as we move forward is figure out how the participation in these types of CME programs can allow the physicians to then qualify for their Part 4 MOC requirements, whether it's through ABIM or ABFM or others. So that's, with the initial projects underway, part of what they're able to do. And as we build and plan for projects moving forward, because we've already been hearing this as a real interest and need from our provider groups, we'll do our best to ensure that the partners preparing these programs are taking that into consideration and making it seamless for the physicians to qualify for their maintenance of certification Part 4 requirements. So these are a couple of quick examples. The comparative methods for assessing performance improvement program with Jocelyn Diabetes Center is actually underway as we speak. And Aurora Healthcare and Swedish American are kind enough to participate in this, and we're getting some regular but very preliminary feedback to this program as it's underway now. It's got a research component to it, because it's not just about looking at the CME and the impact of the CME, but Jocelyn's actually set it up in a way so that they can, from a research perspective, evaluate the different data methodologies to assess physicians' performance using the electronic health record data and comparing that to some of the self-reported outcomes data. So that's underway now. There's another program that Jocelyn Diabetes Center is also leading called the Insulin Proficiency Training Program, designed to implement strategies to help physicians overcome barriers to initiate insulin therapy for type 2 diabetes patients, who are at A1C levels over 7 and on 2 or more medications already. So that also has the personalized dashboard. It's got patient case simulations and a variety of other resource tools. Brown and Tolan is going to be participating in that activity. I believe just as of last week, Cornerstone is going to be participating in that, and we're hopeful to have 1 or 2 other provider groups before we launch in May. Jocelyn is also initiating a program called Cardiovascular Risk in Rheumatoid Arthritis. And this one's actually very unique, too, because it does have a live component to it as a start. So it doesn't start officially until September, although we're looking for a couple of provider groups now who have, 3 to 5 or more if possible, but I know rheumatologists is, there are not as many of them. So a number of rheumatologists and then the primary care physicians who are treating patients with RA. And the idea there is to have Jocelyn with their faculty lead a kickoff workshop on premise or at a local, facility nearby each one of the provider organizations to bring together the healthcare team, the primary care as well as the specialists, and actually not just do the education and focus on cardiovascular risk screening and RA, but actually bring in the data to the dialogue and the discussion which Humedica would provide, so that the organization can all know and talk to each other about, as a group, how are they performing in terms of CV risk screening and RA, and then use that as a launch pad to bring the physicians into some of the different activities online, let them assess their own individual performance data, and then 6 months later come back to them and communicate out how their scores have improved. And then another one that just as of yesterday, community has decided to be a part of, and we're going to be engaging a few others, and a number of you have expressed interest in the pneumococcal vaccine immunization program being conducted by University of Cincinnati. They have a chair there, Dr. Tiffany Deers, who's going to be building a number of case vignettes and other sort of resource materials as part of this curriculum kicking off in June. And the goal there is really quite simply around the CDC guidelines for improving guideline adherence to pneumococcal vaccine administrations in patients over 65 or in a high-risk special patient population. So those are some of the CME initiatives that are already underway, and actually I'll give you another example of some of the ones that are in discussion or in development, or grant proposals are being generated for with organizations like Duke and Joslin and Hopkins, as I mentioned. In the areas of hepatitis C, there's an obesity educator training and certification program Jocelyn is developing and is interested in taking that out and offering that up to our provider organizations, and then measuring the impact on BMI with comorbid conditions. As an example, stroke prevention in patients with atrial fibrillation, appropriate use of opioid therapy and pain management, which I've heard from a number of you is a real area of unmet need that would be of interest to take to primary care physicians and pain specialists, and then doing some other diabetes programs. There's a number of, I think, other initiatives in there, diabetes, given the needs and variations in care there. And then I'll just go back to this one. This is not a CME initiative per se, but it's an educational needs assessment research study that Joslin Diabetes is conducting, and they've actually already done a series of focus groups to understand from a qualitative perspective how physicians are making treatment decisions with respect to their type 2 diabetes patients, with a focus on some of the newer agents, GLP-1s as an example. And what they're looking to do with Humedica now is to actually expand upon that initiative and conduct some surveys among physicians within our provider network, and then actually integrate that self-reported survey data with the actual clinical performance data to tell a story about physicians' attitudes and treatments and decision-making process when managing their patients with type 2 diabetes, and in particular, how they're using GLP-1 agonists to get their patients to goal, or what are the barriers to using some of those newer agents. So really kind of better understanding that, and then preparing a publication which any of the participating provider groups would have, obviously, acknowledgement in, and sharing that out with the industry. And that's pretty much it from the CME and some of the initial research examples. I think our next steps, and obviously we want to open this up to Q&A, but we've already had a number of conversations with many of your teams, and we sort of know who the point people are from a CME perspective. It may be different if we're talking about kind of popping it up a level and having a broader discussion about some of these initiatives, as well as some of the other range of ideas that Alan spoke about earlier. So trying to understand, who the right point person is or people are to engage in discussion moving forward after we send out and hopefully get some good response to the survey that Alan spoke about earlier. We'll be in a good position with Anseta to facilitate some of those discussions and get some of the feedback from you all about the initial opportunities that we're thinking about building or already have underway, and what else we could be doing so that we have a really collaborative approach to moving some of these forward, again, in both the CME and the research space, as well as disease management and clinical trial, patient recruitment, and other things Alan spoke about.
Any questions?
Adult primary care, how are you doing in the pediatric OBGYN? Can you see yourself moving into that group too?
Yeah, from an education perspective or just in general?
Education perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I think, as long as we have the data, and for many of you and most of you, we do, and it's, again, not just areas that are limited to mind share, but beyond, then we're absolutely willing and able to work across different clinical areas and across different specialty divisions. I know that I didn't mention it earlier, but there's a project being initiated around adolescent immunizations, and actually a regional focus there in the Southeast, too. So that's something else that we'll be talking to you all more about and seeing if there's interest in.
One of the questions is, how do you, many of the specialties have their own little modules for
Right.
CME and maintain. So the physicians are focused on that. They have to almost use those, thinking about MK, SAP, MixApp, where they have to kind of buy that module, use that for their certification. And I understand how this can help them get some of the MOCs for improvement in performance. But I'm looking at it from the physician perspective is how do you not overwhelm them? I've got to go to this program, I've got to do this program. How do you integrate it so that it's relatively seamless for them?
Yeah. From a maintenance of certification perspective, the maintenance of certification has many different components to it, so I don't anticipate we'll be able to take the place of all of those. I think that as it relates to the Part 4 modules, many of these now and the ones moving forward will create an opportunity for them to actually satisfy that component of the MOC requirements for many of the boards. But as far as, how does this relate to or interact with a number of other engagements that they may be a part of. I see this really as, like I mentioned earlier, they're already out there very involved with different CME, and we know that the way they're making those decisions is based on, topics that are of interest for them, information that they need to know more about to stay on top of their practice, faculty that's credible and that they want to learn from. And what we're really saying is we can bring you those kinds of CME opportunities too, but we can just do it in sort of a new and improved way where it's a little bit more personalized because you can see your data before and after. And so it's probably going to start taking the place of some of the things that they're already doing, or maybe just be additive knowing that they are consuming, education and information, CME or non, at the rapid rates that they're doing.
Question? You mentioned there are grants that help fund some of this. Where does that grant money come from? And we have a project with Jocelyn, very similar to that. And their grant money came from pharma, so it really was a pharma project. And although it came to us from Jocelyn, so I'm curious where the money starts, and because it does seem like a opportunity to connect with pharma. And if those dollars are coming from pharma, what of that comes to these organizations that are providing your physicians to complete surveys that help and that have potentially CME topics that are directed from their initiatives, from their agendas, and not necessarily ours? I know there's opportunity for ours to be there too, but it looks like there's other agendas that might be in the middle of it.
Well, so that's a great question. So where the funding comes from, the educational grant funding comes from pharmaceutical companies. And for those of you less familiar with kind of how that works, the ACCME probably about 5 or 6 years ago put some very tight, stringent policies in place so that those educational grant dollars really minimize any potential for conflicts of interest. So yes, naturally, the pharmaceutical companies who are supporting those grant dollars are going to be supporting, programs in areas where they have some commercial interest, right? I mean, that would only make sense. They are a business, but the organization or the divisions within the pharmaceutical companies who are managing those grant dollars, those grant budgets, and approving proposals as they come in for grant funding are very much firewalled from any other part of the organization. So it is very much of kind of an above brand initiative where they're making decisions about what programs coming in from Jocelyn or other accredited providers they want to fund. And then those accredited providers, the academic organizations, are really responsible for taking those grant dollars and determining what the educational needs are, what the gaps are to address, what are the measures, clinical measures and process and performance areas to look at. And the pharmaceutical companies have absolutely no influence or ability to inform that process from a content or outcomes perspective.
But they get marketing information that can go back to how they market to North Texas or Dallas or practice, because unless that information is wanted to reach, then
Maybe talking about the research list, CME.
Yes. Yeah, the research is not shared at a physician level or a group level back to the pharmaceutical company. Jocelyn is, they know who participated potentially in the study, but Jocelyn is the only one that would get the physician level information, and then they roll that up into the study
Aggregate
results,
findings.
aggregate results. So they're not going to see that North Texas is different than Dallas.
And the other piece, I think, so you're speaking specifically about the research example, the diabetes research study, as less so the CME?
And I'm sorry, just in general,
Okay.
the hepatitis C, I'm thinking these are people trying to sell drugs for that. The pneumovax, I'm thinking they're trying to sell more pneumococcal vaccines. And so there's an initiative, there's an agenda for them to do that. And I can understand that. That's great as long as some of those funds are coming back to the organizations that are participating. The surveys that are filled out, the questionnaires are all things that, well, not all, but I'm thinking many of them are designed to help the pharmaceutical companies create their marketing strategies. And that's wonderful as long as some of those funds are paying for that are coming back to the organizations that are providing that data.
Yeah, so there are, let me be clear, there are different flavors of study. The PI CME and the CME are governed by the Sunshine Act, which prohibits, is really a firewall within life sciences organizations. It's not commercially used. The data collected is not shared back to the commercial side, and the funds are given to the AMC like Ann described and are not available to pay physicians to participate in education. The other projects, some of which we listed, market research, trials, et cetera, your provider organization would have dollars and revenue opportunities associated with those. So if there was a market research study to look across the utilization of certain brands and your organization said, we want to participate in this, your organization, your physicians would get an individual stipend and your organization would get something above and beyond a management fee. But on the CME side, there are very strict regulations about how that is done, and that is different than some of the other more, I'll call them more commercial-like opportunities, even though some of them are clinical in nature, such as trials. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, we're happy to talk about it. But, and also just to be clear, there is a stipend allocated for any one of the projects for the organizations in participation. But just to elaborate further on that, you mentioned Hep C as an example. The type of information and objectives that would come out of that Hep C program would be not around prescribing. First of all, CME never talks about brand level medications. Everything is at the class level, right? So, that Hep C example, the idea there is to educate physicians around some of the new CDC guidelines about screening all patients between ages or born in 1945 to 1964, because the pharma companies realize they have an obligation to support those kinds of initiatives where the physicians are, better at screening and diagnosing and treating, not with respect to their brands per se, but just with respect to better patient care overall. Well, and I think to Alan's point earlier about flipping the model a little bit, this is exactly where there should be a more collaborative approach to, it's one thing for us to collaborate with, Hopkins and whomever about educational proposals that they're putting together or getting funding for, and then seeing if it's of interest for our provider organizations to participate and enroll their physicians in. It's another thing for you all to be saying, these are some of the programs and the opportunities we would like to see built, because, and many of you have given me some examples in pain management where where some of the gaps in care are in your organizations, and you want us to actually help provide funding and get programs generated with partners to accommodate some of those needs.
And I can assure you, if we went and had a design program with groups that had committed to doing this, and you told us, these are the organizations we'd like you to target, have it multi-funded, have it looked at in this manner, I can assure you that would be much more powerful if we went back to those organizations or funding sources, be it government, be it life sciences companies, be it payers, et cetera, and said, we have this group of providers and organizations who have designed this protocol or designed this study and want this funded. And I can assure you that those would have a far greater hit rate and benefit than the other way now. If there are no more questions.
I think we've exhausted our time.
I'd just like to thank everyone, and again, thank John, Cindy, and the rest of the Ansetta team for everything, and Don Fisher and Jerry for their ongoing support of Ansetta. Thank you.
And then the Centura one
It's on the desktop, so I can come.
it's on the desktop. Okay.
In the folder called Thursday folder.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thanks, Alan and Ann. I think the key thought about this is the opportunity to to really turn things around so that we're being we're taking the lead in terms of driving these opportunities rather than simply responding. And I think Humedica's ability to do that, being in the position of having this unique combination of data and the opportunity with AMGA acting as the trusted intermediary is really a thing that will give us some opportunity to drive those processes, and appreciate your leadership in thinking those ways and driving that process. So wanted to sort of begin our formal collaborative activity first by thanking all of the people who have contributed and made it possible. First, our host, Brown and Toland Physicians. We very much appreciate the tour yesterday. Adrian has been extremely helpful in getting things going, and so we thank them for that. Our planning committee, and we are looking for additional members of the planning committee if you wish. So but Elizabeth and Steve Morgan and Pat Rankin and Adrian and John Walker have been part of our planning committee. They have told us things like less data at the collaborative meetings. Don't just barrage us with data. Do a little more data in advance. We'll get it a bit farther in advance, but we'll do more of the data stuff on webinars and through the portal. And I think that's one of the things that will make us more efficient and keep more sustained activity between the meetings. But it's not so much less data as more networking, and that's the real advantage to coming together and spending time together, getting to know each other, getting to know the things that you're working on, the things that your organization is seeing as priorities for improving care. And I think that is the reason that we really are doing this, is to use the data simply to stimulate those conversations. And We'll have several networking opportunities. One of the things that I thought was very important is that it's hard to find a time when everybody can come. We have a lot of people who wanted to come to this meeting. This is the largest meeting we've ever had. Every meeting keeps getting larger. And we have 3 new groups who are here for the first time, the Baylor Quality Alliance, Aurora, and Health East. And we have some new people from some other groups, so that's great. But the fact that 3 members of our planning committee weren't able to come because of conflicting meetings, so we're trying to schedule things a little farther in advance. And you can see here that we now have a date for the fall collaborative, and our plan is to do the spring collaborative at a time after the AMGA annual conference every year, and then do the fall collaborative in conjunction with the AMGA Institute for Quality Leadership meeting. So So we do have the date for that. It's been set, and so if we could encourage people to try to reserve those dates on your calendars, we very much are looking forward to seeing you then as well. And I really want to thank Humedica for the dinners last night. You know, if the Optum thing doesn't work out, I think choosing restaurants is a real opportunity that Humedica can do a great job with. So we really appreciate that. We would like to ask everybody to just kind of go around and do introductions. First, I want to acknowledge Don Fisher, whose idea ANSETA has been over the past decade or so, and very much appreciate Don's support as CEO of AMGA and chair of ANSETA. Because this is, it's taken a lot to get this together, and finding Humedica, which was the right partner, has been a really important part of this, and we're just so proud of Humedica's taking the next step in their evolution with Optum. So that's just an excellent event. Also acknowledge Jerry Penso, our Chief Medical and Quality Officer. Jerry's expertise in doing collaborative shared learning has been very helpful to us and will inform us and as we go forward as well. So appreciate both of you being here. We'll review the agenda in a minute, but if we could kind of pass around the microphone. We are recording the session, not because we're going to like put it on the web or anything, but just for reference so we make sure that we don't miss anything. So if people wouldn't mind going around sort of giving us your name and organization and role, and kind of, you know, what your interest is in all of this collaborative activity.
Sure. I'm Dr. Chris Naglia with Holston Medical Group. I'm a hospitalist, and I'll be talking about Holston Medical Group's extensivist program later today.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Orr. I'm a family physician. I also have a background in public health research, and I'm a subject matter expert for Humedica. I look forward to meeting you all.
Hi, I'm Mike Charles with Centera, family physician and medical director for clinical effectiveness, and we're going to be talking in just a few minutes about our journey to our medical home.
Diane Hunley with Centera Medical Group, and I'm a dyad to Mike Charles. I am a nurse by training, and we work very closely on lots of data and outcomes.
Katie Rollerson with Centera Medical Group. I'm an analyst, informatics side.
Hi, I'm Susan Becker. I'm with DuPage Medical Group. I'm the manager of quality, and I'm a nurse by training.
Morning, I'm Dr. Paul Wilson from Indianapolis Community Physician Network. I'm the Senior Medical Director, Primary Care.
I'm Fred Wintery, internist at Brown & Tolan. I'm a medical director there and hoping to learn more about Humedica.
Lucas Kowczynski, Mayo Clinic, industrial engineer by training, subject matter expert of Humedica.
I'm Brian Shoup. I'm a data analyst at Billings Clinic, focused on inpatient quality and outpatient measures, sets like PGP and ACO and MSSP.
I'm Adrian Rawlinson, Director of Medical Informatics at Brown & Toland, and welcome to San Francisco.
I'm Craig Hepp, the Director of Practice Management at Billings Clinic, and focusing mainly on our population management efforts.
I'm Dale Green. I'm with Cornerstone Healthcare. I'm the Chief Medical Information Officer with Dr. Walker. I'm a pulmonary and critical care doctor by background.
Catherine Mullen, Strategic Client Manager with Humedica, clinical pharmacist and quality professional by background.
Linda Claus, consultant with Humedica, and I'm a health information management professional by background.
Christina Bradshaw, lead analyst with Holston Medical Group Analytics.
John Walker, Chief Medical Officer for Cornerstone Healthcare.
Jonathan Hines, Chief Medical Officer for Wilmington Health and internist.
John Pasquarello, General Internist at Wilmington Health, interested in improving quality measures for our practice.
I'm Brittany Cry. I'm the clinical analyst at Wilmington Health.
Julie Leibel, clinical analyst at Health East Care System.
Hi, I'm Julie Sander with I'm the Director of Quality with the Iowa Clinic in West Des Moines, Iowa.
I'm Betty Sedler with Colorado Springs Health Partners. I'm the hospitalist and clinical innovations manager, RN by background.
Debbie Chandler, I'm the CEO with Colorado Springs Health Partners.
And Dennis Schneider, Chief Medical Officer, CSHP.
I'm Gordon Golden, an internist with Colorado Springs Health Partner and Associate Medical Director for our EHR.
I'm Dick Jenner, a pediatrician by profession, Vice President of Holston Medical Group, and a long-time relationship with the EMR.
I'm Joan Compton, CSHP, and I'm the director over the Clinical Innovation Department, which is a new department to just try to do all this work. I have an RN background.
Sure. Alan Kamer with Humedica. You heard from me already.
Jerry Penso, Chief Medical and Quality Officer at AMGA.
Tom Callahan, the Director of Solutions Management with Allscripts, and I do day-to-day support of our Humedica partnership.
Tim Houchins, Director Informatics for Health Texas Provider Network and Baylor Quality Alliance.
I'm Jen Tunover. I'm a project manager for Aurora Healthcare and I'm an RN by background.
I'm Nikita Stepnowitz, and I am NSETA's statistical analyst.
I'm Don Fisher, President and CEO of AMGA and Chairman of the Board of ANSETA.
Rich Stepnowitz with ANSETA, Chief Technology Officer.
Laura Spur, Project Manager at Aurora Healthcare, and my background is in healthcare informatics.
Elise Yoss, Strategic Client Manager with Humedica.
Hi, I'm Dana Herman, Strategic Client Manager with Humedica also.
Sharon Morley, Strategic Client Manager with Humedica, and I have an RN background.
Becky Hood, Chief Information Officer with the Everett Clinic.
Paige Nelson, Director of Quality Improvement at the Everett Clinic, and we're a founding member of, well, it had a different name back then, but anyway, ANSETA Humedica, and we have an interest in kind of getting back into it and seeing where you're at now. So we're pretty excited about that. Thank you.
Lisa Hills, Director of Clinical Excellence for Community Physician Network in Indianapolis, along with Dr. Wilson, and I'm an RN by background as well.
I'm Michael Low Liberty. I am a business and data analyst for Brown and Tolan, which is focusing my efforts at my health medical group, which some of you joined us yesterday for the tour.
Ann Goodrich at Humedica, Director of Strategic Alliances.
Sarah London, Strategic Client Manager at Humedica.
Mary Lanton, VP of Client Services at Humedica, and so great to have you all here, and looking forward to the next couple days.
Lauren Penn, Strategic Client Manager at Humedica as well.
Thank you. I'm Michael Sills. I'm a VP of IT at the Baylor Quality Alliance and a cardiologist at Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas.
I'm Cliff Fullerton, a family physician, Chief Medical Officer for Baylor Quality Alliance, and have a background of overprescribing branded medications.
I'm Sharon Gabrielson, Vice Chair for Mayo Clinic Health System and the administrative sponsor for Humedica in our organization.
Lou Cole, CMIO at Mount Kisco Medical Group in New York.
Glenn McClintock, Operations Manager for Medical Services at Brown and Tolan.
Hi, Fiona Wilson, Chief of Clinical Transformation at Brown and Tolan and President of My Health Medical Group that many of you toured yesterday.
Hi, and I'm Cindy Shakela, the one who's been littering your email with lots of data and agendas and updates. So welcome and thank you all for coming.
Okay. We get everybody, or okay? I'm sure we've done that. So, quick agenda review. Centera, we talked a lot about PCMH yesterday, and Centera is describing their experience this morning, and we'll show you just a couple of interesting pieces of data that connect with that. We'll have more tomorrow about very specifically looking at opportunity and ways of thinking about opportunity, and we'll do that tomorrow morning around diabetes. But we also want to focus on hypertension. As you know, AMGA is the AMGF, the American Medical Group Foundation, is interested in reducing the burden of chronic disease for the nation. And starting with hypertension, which is one of the greatest opportunities and perhaps not one that a lot of other people are paying a great deal of attention to. However, Kaiser of Northern California has been paying attention to it. And Jerry actually has worked with Dr. Mark Jaffe, who has led that initiative for Kaiser of Northern California, and they have the best performance, the best control rates in California in the IHA data, and they also are leading nationally in the HEDIS data as well. So it's the bad news is it's taken them a while. We're hoping we can accelerate things a little bit. In fact, I think that's going to be one of the themes of our ANSETA collaborative, is how rapidly we can do things. The national initiative, Measure Up, Pressure Down, that AMGF has going, I think also represents a real opportunity for us to show the value of the work we're doing together and the data resources that Humedica provides in actually making some dramatic improvements, some breakthrough kinds of improvements in things that otherwise have been a relatively slow, steady, measured, encouraging, remember I'm the staff optimist, good thing to have happen, but not as fast as we need to get there. So I think one of our themes needs to be how we can make things happen faster and how we can use what we learn from each other as well as the data to do that. Our lunch will be upstairs in Skyline A, which is the 21st floor, so you only need to remember 2 floors. When we want sunshine, 21, after we've been in our cave down here on floor 2. So we are between the 2nd floor and the 21st floor. And then we'll do a little group exercise in hypertension, just an opportunity to kind of work together. There are dots on your name tags which indicate groups, and we'll talk about that after lunch and spend about an hour on it, just as an opportunity to kind of think through some of the issues of using data and what you already know and what you're already doing about hypertension improvement. A topic that the Planning Committee was very interested in, and we are, as we've talked to more and more of the participants in the collaborative, we've learned that a lot of people are working on this, is the idea of extensivist models, outpatient intensive care, using data to help risk stratify patients for intensive intervention, hoping that can improve health in patients who are pretty fragile and pretty complicated, but also reduce overall utilization, which is good for everybody. Humedica then will talk a little bit about some of the new features in Mindshare. Just last week, as you know, there was a new release which has substantial additional functionality in it, and we have had the CHF predictive model for a while, but it's now joined by predictive models for diabetes and COPD. After that, another thing that the Planning Committee thought would be a good idea is to try sort of an open space. And this is an opportunity to network, but without a whole lot of preparation. It's just what you are thinking, what you know, and an opportunity to talk with each other. This may be a place where some new initiatives, new directions for the ANSETA collaborative come from. But the idea is simply to ask people to to choose topics. And the topics that have been suggested thus far are on a sheet. There's one sheet for every table. And so the idea would be for you to vote, not individually, but not for your table, but individually, and sort of check, put a couple of check marks or a check mark on the one that you think is most interesting and you would be willing to participate in. And then over lunch, we'll tally the results. We've got a couple of breakout rooms, so our thought is to kind of separate the group into two. But if it turns out there's a tie for a three-way tie, we can probably do 3 groups. But the idea of just being able to talk about whatever topics are of interest. If you have an additional really burning topic, we can consider that. But let's try to stay with the topics we have. We're going to try to wrap up right by 4:30 today, so that we can depart on the buses for the dinner cruise on the bay. Fortunately, this is where having Brown and Toland as host is so important, because they've actually arranged warmer weather than San Francisco has had for a very long time, and the winds are dying down, because being out on the bay in chilly weather with a lot of wind wouldn't be quite as pleasant as I think this will be. So we very much appreciate, Adrian, that work you've done. Tomorrow, we'll talk about diabetes best practices. Got a little more than an hour on that. And then we'll have a breakout session. The idea that we can sort of get into 2 groups to talk about a couple of things that, one of which Humedica will lead, the idea of sort of the governance of mindshare. How do you make sure, how do you give everybody the ability to use the exploratory opportunities that mindshare presents, but still keep kind of a single version of the truth for the organization. That's a hard question for large organizations. It's a hard question even for small organizations. So that, and then there are a lot of new features in report distribution that are part of this quarter's or half year's release of mindshare. So a little more emphasis on that during the breakout. Another question we've gotten is, how can we use the data to try to understand primary care panel sizes a little better? And we have looked at some data, looked at the data about that. I can tell you we don't have any answers yet, but we've got a lot of questions that we would like to ask the people who are thinking about those questions, and then with your guidance, I think we can get some real value from the data resources. And so over the summer, we will work through that initiative. And then we'll get back to the measure up, pressure down, the idea of the particular planks and how the measures will be done. One of the good things about being part of ANSETA is that you don't have to report measures, because your data are already flowing to Humedica, and we can summarize the data there, and we'll have much more detail than would be available for most of the other groups. But what I'm really hoping is that we will have faster progress and a lot of great progress to report. So anyway, after that, just wrap up. We will try to get you out of here so there's plenty of time to get back for the early afternoon flights to the airport if you have one of those flights scheduled. So does that make sense as an agenda? Just sort of, okay. Well, let us find the Thursday folder here. And we will see there's, let's see the word Centera, we see SMG, so we have to translate, but we can do that. So, Mike and Diane, if you would begin, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, great. Okay. After all this PCMH work, you need
That's right. So I guess I can just right-click as we go here. All right, thank you all for having us here. And we're going to give a little bit of talk on our journey to the medical home. And as you all saw yesterday, it's not just about PQRS certification, but more transforming our primary care offices. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here. And I don't have our Centera slides, but since we have some new people here, I'll just real briefly give an overview of Centera. We're a multi-specialty integrated healthcare system, and the actual other complete end of the country where we can dip our feet in the Atlantic Ocean there. We have 9 hospitals, 650 providers. Depending on what time it is, it might be 667 now because we put out some offers yesterday. So as you all are, we're trying to continue to grow. The Centera Corporation has an insurance arm called Optima, and of course they oversee the hospitals, and then Centera Medical Group, which is what we're a part of. We started with the EMR Epic in 2007 and put it into all our practices. I believe it took about a year or so to integrate into all our practices, and up pretty much fully in Epic now. Of course, it's in our hospital systems too. So let's see if I can move forward. Good, it's working. So we call this transformation of care is our kind of journey to the medical home. And again, just like you saw yesterday, it's more than just the medical home, but we're transforming the care in our primary care practices. And a few of our principles that we've gone by with this, patient-centered, of course, contribute to the highest level of licensure. So all of our staff members in our offices are doing what they should be doing at the highest level. Data-driven decision-making, which is what we're all here about today, but that drives a lot of where some of these initiatives have come from. And then, of course, standardization, or the new politically correct term is decreased variance. Because when you talk to providers, if you say standardization, that means we're telling you what to do. When we're decreasing your variance, that means that we're helping you. So it's not standardization anymore, it's decreased variance. So this is the going right to the punchline here, pretty much. We started in 2010, and this is our first sites, and I'll go into a little detail of what we're talking about. We did this in kind of a wave program, but this is the results that we've obtained from this. Just my chart, if you're not familiar with Epic, is the patient portal that we had it's a great opportunity for communication between providers, but also does give, we have e-visits with it, and other opportunities for gathering information before visits and between visits too. So we had a pretty big initiative to try and push my chart out. 30-day all-cause readmission rates were decreased, ED visits were decreased, the D5, all or none, just a great job. We had one of our providers who was in the Wave 1 site, actually, his D5 numbers beat the state of Minnesota, who's like, the mecca of D5. It's just one person, not our average, don't get us wrong. We're still way below Minnesota. But one provider did it, so it's kind of what we've done. He used some of his best practice, and he said, how are you doing this? How are your D5 numbers so high? So he would help us out, too, with some of his best practices, which you'll see what we kind of use, in our PCPC meetings, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the generic prescription rate, improved diabetic eye exams, patient satisfaction, 7-day hospital follow-up, and the VIP, which are a very important patient population. Those are our high-touch patients there. Achievements to date, we did do a new compensation model a year ago. We were completely RVU prior to that, and what we did is a salary base with a productivity incentive, and then 10% of the rest was at risk, which was split equally between quality, citizenship, fiscal responsibility, and patient satisfaction. We encourage active physician participation in committees. We have 102 of our providers active in our committees now. We did receive level 3 recognition in all 38 of our PCP practices. We are working the staffing care model defined, and it's engaging the staff, like we said, at every level, but the highest level of your licensure. Care management model for high opportunity patients. Those are our VIP patients that we're talking about. We have care managers. They're not in every practice. They share practices, so we might have one care manager for 2 or 3 sites. Facilitated monthly practice meetings where we have the core team that'll go to the different sites for their medical home meetings monthly and facilitate a organized agenda around the medical home initiatives that we're doing that month. The PCPC, which is this Physician Clinical Protocol Committee, has been a great driver for a lot of things we're doing. It meets actually every Thursday, and just recently we talked to our providers, and we have a lot of primary care docs engaged in this, and we said, hey, we've been doing this now for 2 to 3 years every Thursday. Do you want to cut back? And they said no. They really are very engaged in these clinical decisions, and it's a part of, when I talk in a few minutes, you'll see that we really, I think it's one of the reasons we were successful with how we move this out, is getting the buy-in from our providers and listening to them as we move forward. Let's see, then the best care practice protocols, of course, and quality, safety, satisfaction. And then the quality dashboards in diabetes, heart stroke, heart failure, adult preventative bundles, which we work through health maintenance and EPIC, the pediatric preventive, respiratory disease, and patient satisfaction. And we do some of these through EPIC, but Humedica has helped us out a lot too. I know just specifically in my practice, they've come and helped us build a dashboard that we can use, even drive down even more detail than we can with the dashboards we have in EPIC. So that's been a great help too. And this is to show kind of the big overview of the journey, I should say, to transformation of care. So in July 2010, we started with 2 sites, the pilot sites, and some of the members of this were on this PCPC committee I told you too. But those were the 2 sites that started things out. A lot of feedback from those providers. What are we doing right? What can we do better? Ideas. Then we moved on to 3 additional sites. So the bottom is wave 1, and then the second circle coming up is wave 2. We put it out to 5 sites, got feedback from all these sites, moved things forward. And then at that point, we kind of stopped, and we found we already discovered some best practices at that point that we know we needed to move out to the rest of our practices. So we kind of stopped and set these best practices out to all of our practices, even the ones that weren't medical homes yet, but started initiating some of these best practices we knew were working. We knew we got great feedback from our providers about, so we said, why wait? Let's move some of these things out now. And we did it at that point. And then you can see the wave 3 is then the next circle, which is the 6 additional sites. And wave 4 is actually in place right now, which is the last sites. And you'll see when John shows some of the data from Humedica, you'll see the difference in the wave 4 sites and the wave 1 and 2 sites on how we're managing diseases. So it is working here. And so the TOC, again, that's short for transformation of care. That's what this process is called. And I should stop and give some kudos to Dan Dickinson, Colette Carver, and their team, because they've been involved with this from square one, and they're the driving force behind this. Can't thank them enough, I mean. So the TOC, the practice redesign, efficiency standardization, our monthly medical home meetings, the NCQ recognition, of course, in the medical home for all 38, and that we have 96 diabetes certified and 78 for heart stroke. The quality data, which we'll talk a little bit more coming up, the population management, both chronic and preventative focus. We work registries, which we'll go in a little bit detail about our diabetes registry tomorrow, a little bit more. And then the high opportunity care managed patients we'll talk about in a little bit here too. This is kind of giving you a preview of what we're going to be talking about here. Building and sustaining culture, provider engagement, and expanding to care delivery and innovation are some other things we'll talk about here. So the essential components of the office redesign, again, efficiency and decreased variance, monthly medical home meetings, and then the NCQA recognition. This is what we call the Pioneer Guide. It's kind of hard to see, but I'll walk you through it. So again, we have these on the very left column you can focus on. These are some of those initiatives that we had talked about that we were trying to standardize, again, that word, but it's hard to get away from, but improve our efficiencies in the office. And what we did is we're going to move this out to other practices. We have 38 primary care practices, and we have 2 to 3 in the initial sites. We had to move it out. So the Pioneer Guide is kind of just what it says. We're moving out to new sites that haven't been used to this kind of changes and kind of give them a standard guide, who does what, where they do it, what their responsibilities are. So again, you'll see the missions on the left side, and then across the top you see what the secretary, front desk is responsible for, the MA, the RN or care manager, of course the provider who has responsibilities in this too, and then the office manager. And the next page is the last part, so this is, again, all the same part of what you've seen in the Pioneer Guide here. And you can see the registries that we're talking about. Registries are worked by the secretaries and the MAs, reviewed by the provider, but pretty much the registries are done behind the scenes for the provider. Advanced care planning, quality metrics, the VIP population, again, is what the care managers touch. After visit summaries that we put into place through EPIC, and then customer service and MyChart enrollment. And we have a focus right now on 7 critical elements out of those. These 7 were part of what you saw in the missions of the Pioneer Guide, the pre-visit planning and huddle. We do institute huddles within our office, within the provider and their staff. Try and do it in the morning. Sometimes it works better at lunchtime, where everybody will get together, look at the schedule, look at patients that are VIP, which are also flagged on EPIC, so you can see if they're a VIP patient. Go over the plans for that day, what we need to do. The rooming, we've actually decreased variance in our rooming. So we've put that across our practices, where one of the challenges we had, if even within our own practices, in my practice in primary care, we've had an MA that would be my MA, room my patients, and then if I'm out, they'd have to transition over to another provider. And that provider, of course, had a whole different way of doing things, and it just didn't make sense at all. It's inefficient to do that. We can't really move our staff back and forth. So we actually just, put together, and how we did it is I put what I do, I looked at what the other providers do, and we just got together and said, most of it overlaps, but no, this is a good idea. Let's do yours for this. We don't need to do that. And we got one list together. So if any of our staff members rooms a patient in our office now, they do the exact same rooming. And it makes it so much easier when they flip-flop back and forth. The staff actually loves it. It's a lot easier for them, and it's a lot more efficient. I mean, one of my, as a provider, if your usual staff person who rooms your patients is out sick that day, the first thing you think of is, oh no, it's going to be a horrible day. But now it's not. They come in, somebody else steps in, now my patients are roomed exactly as they were, even if my primary person was there. So that's another kind of a big advantage of this process that we were doing, transforming care just on a lot of different levels in the office. Medicine reconciliation, obviously, it's a key that we have been working on. Our registries, which again are done through our secretaries, the after-visit summary, and then 7-day hospital follow-up is another key initiative we have right now. So the essential components of the office redesign are medical home meetings. So this is just, this is set for all of our practices. There's a multidisciplinary team. This, again, is some of the people like Colette and Dan Dickinson. Initially, they would go to all these meetings in the Wave 1 and 2 sites. Now they can't, but there's a team still that goes out to these meetings to help answer questions. We actually have a data team, and Diane and Katie and other people will go to the offices and answer data questions at these meetings. We usually have our case managers there to do a case study for them. Discuss readmission cases, why they got readmitted, scorecard reviews. We actually will pull up the scorecard electronically and just, it's a KPI, but we can pull it up and go right to our site and drill down on the data for how we're doing site to site on our scorecards each month. And then as we see, we've got red, yellow, green scorecards. The reds, we look and how can we improve those. We can review the Pioneer Guide, but also there's initiatives that we discuss to focus on specific areas for improvement. And then the innovation and best practice sharing. We have just started some innovation calls. We did one on hypertension a few weeks ago, and yesterday we did one on pneumococcal vaccinations. And they're put together by one of our providers who volunteers, who has expertise in that area. and it's focused on the providers and the staff over lunchtime. It's a half-hour call, and just focuses people. We're talking about our pneumococcal rates getting up and also about our blood pressure. All right, at this point, I'm going to hand off to Diane a little bit, and she's going to talk about some of the data.
Your turn to rest. Good morning. It is a large crowd. That's kind of exciting. I'm going to talk about how data drives performance, and I'll discuss the following things: population management, practice scorecards, high opportunity care managed patients, and patient and staff satisfaction surveys. We have registries for chronic diseases with CHF, heart and stroke, diabetes, and they're printed every month, and the secretary works these reports, and we actually can pull them any which way we want. If we want to, say for your diabetics, you want to look at your hemoglobin A1Cs over 8, we can pull them that way so that they show up at the top first, and then the ones that you're doing much better are at the bottom. Or if, say, you know, you're missing a lot of your microalbumins, you may want to print them first. So you can work them several different ways. It's printed once a month, and each secretary is tasked with calling 3 patients and making appointments for calling maybe more than 3 patients, but making 3 appointments a day. And Mike can testify, you're seeing patients now that you haven't seen in a long time, which is a good thing. So that's going really well. We have registries for adult preventative bundles. We know what's missing off their health maintenance, so we're able to make great strides there. And we receive reports daily on ED and hospital discharges so that we can contact and get them in for a 7-day follow-up, which is good. We've had tremendous growth there. We also have something new, and it's we called it Care Gaps, and we implemented it at one of our large sites where we reached out to folks to get those gaps in care taken care of. It went fairly well. We did it through Televox, and then we switched to, you know, person-to-person contact. And I remember Dr. Walker, 1 or 2 meetings ago, you talked about that. Really sparked my interest. So, but we had pretty good success. We ran about a 20%, you know, rate. So we're now implementing it throughout the whole medical group. But with physician input, we're just targeting a limited amount of diseases, mammo or tests, screenings, mammo and colon cancer, Tdap, and pneumococcal. So we're excited about that. Next, I want to talk about, we have practice scorecards for all our sites. It's interactive for all of them. It's by practice provider, patient-level data, and that's also reviewed monthly, and action steps are taken. And this is it. And I don't know what you can see from where you're sitting. It's busy. You can see a lot of green, a little bit of red, and some yellow. I'll review the metrics with you. I know Mike mentioned My Chart Patients. That's where we have a portal for patient-physician education, patient-nurse, not education, what's the word? Being able to talk to each other. 30-day all-cause admissions, ED rates, and mine's even blurry too. Let me get this. ED rates per 1,000 patients per month, and the definition's the monthly average. The D5, which Mike mentioned briefly, is the diabetic patient's BP less than 140/90, hemoglobin A1C less than 8, LDL less than 100, non-smoker, and aspirin unless they have existing vascular diseases and it's not contraindicated. And remember, the D5 is all or nothing, which has been a little bit of a challenge. We measure generic prescription usage. We're trying to improve our diabetic eye exam rates by implementing some new methodology. We'll go over more on that tomorrow. It's been a problem. We know a lot of our patients are having it done, and we're not getting the actual exams back to the chart. We measure patient satisfaction, and we use the NRC as our vendor, and our question is, how would you rate your provider, is what we use for this particular scorecard. We have rate a 7-day follow-up with PCP after hospital discharge for medical diagnosis, and then advanced care planning for our VIP population. I want to talk a little bit about our high opportunity care patients, which we call our VIP, and it's a closed cohort right now of about 1,000 members when we started. And we have case managers for them, and it's 150 or less per case manager. We're down some over the last 2 years. This was started in 2011. Unfortunately, you all know what it's like when you go through an upgrade. We're just finishing our Epic upgrade, and so some of our reports are still being validated, so I don't have a current number. But high opportunity patients are tracked for multiple metrics, and we have my healthcare managers embedded at our practices. And here's a picture of Mickey. Let me switch to the next slide. That's one of Mike's, and it's one healthcare manager for 2 to 3 sites, 8 to 10 providers per each case manager. And another thing we started doing is telephone calls for all hospital discharges. There's a 48-hour assessment post-discharge, a 7-day assessment. This is all done by RNs, a 14-day assessment, and then a 21-day assessment. So I want to share with you some of our results, which have been pretty significant over a 2-year period for these high opportunity care patients. Our ED treat and release episodes have decreased by 20%. All-cause inpatient admissions have decreased by 53%. All-cause readmissions decreased by 30%. And 7-day follow-up at SMG is increased by 81%. And that took a lot of work, and we're really proud of that number, so that's pretty exciting. And I'm going to turn physician culture back over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and the last slide you saw was our VIP patients. So it's a high opportunity group that has a lot of room for improvement. That's why those numbers look so good there. But it does go to show how care managers can be very effective in that kind of population there too. So I'm going to finish up with a few more slides here. I don't have too much left, but talk about provider engagement and building and sustaining the culture of quality improvement that we're working on. Again, one of the things I think was a big success on what we've done so far with this transformation in care is this PCPC committee. And we are moving, our Wave 4 sites are now, if you all are familiar geographically with all area, we have Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and then on the, we have a peninsula side, which is Williamsburg, Hampton, and Newport News. So geographically, they're not too far about, but they're separated by bridge tunnels. And if you're familiar with bridges around here, you can understand that's a big barrier. So what we're going to do is move out to Wave 4, and we're actually looking on building a new PCPC committee in the Wave 4 sites so we can get provider buy-in and you know, kind of helping out as we move forward to these sites. Because we found out in the first 2 sites, having the providers involved in these decision-making of these protocols in the PCPC committee was a very key reason that we were successful in doing that. And I think as we're moving it out to Wave 4 now, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge since we've had all these protocols in place. We don't want to go to these sites and say, here's all your protocols, just do it. Again, the providers are going to feel dumped on, and they don't have that sense of buy-in that the initial sites had. So we're actually looking to start a new PCPC committee on the peninsula, where as we move these protocols to Wave 4 sites, they can look at it. We'll probably get some good ideas from the second PCPC committee too. So we're looking forward to that. But that was one of, I think it was a key to some of the success we've had there is that committee. And again, I said the providers, we were looking to cut this back. It's every single Thursday, and they said no, they want to keep doing it every Thursday. So again, workflows and protocols, that's what the protocol committee is built. We usually will drive them through the Quality Committee and the PCPC and then the PAG. PAG is our Physicians Advisory Group for EPIC in our system, our IT system. So these protocols that we build usually are run through those three committees. The disease-focused care plans, best practice alerts, if you're familiar with EPIC, again, some of you are on EPIC. We build those to improving clinical care. There's specific diagnosis comes up, it'll fire a best practice alert to kind of steer our providers in the right direction that way. The registry managed protocols, again, we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we go through our diabetes registry. And then we are working on leadership development within Sentara Medical Group. We have a leadership, a new phase going out right now with a new class of leaders that we have some once a month, 3 or 4 hour classes that they get together and go through. And we're also looking at mentorship programs and other things to help with the leadership development. Expanding the care delivery, continuous innovation. These are some things I think you're probably familiar with. E-visits, I think we have 4 e-visits now within EPIC that we're using and pushing that out. A little drawback to that is, nice thing is we can do those through Optima. We've got Optima, which is our insurer, to buy in, so they are reimbursing for it. Our challenge is getting other insurers out there to reimburse for e-visits. And of course, Medicare won't reimburse for e-visits, so it's a little bit of a challenge now, but this is the wave of the future. I mean, this is how we're going to manage our populations. We can't do it by bringing them into the office. We're going to have to find other ways to do it, and e-visits is one of the starts. Another is MD Live, which is a real-time kind of Skype-type visit that you can do with your providers can do with outside or your own patients. And that can be expanded a lot more, has a lot more opportunities than just e-visits. We can have specialists work in that. We're actually starting to pilot MD Live with our surgeons to do follow-up visits. Instead of bringing them into the office to check their wounds, we can do it on MD Live to save the patients a trip back in. So that's one of the things. Group medical visits, we've had a few of our Wave 1 and 2 sites work on these, mostly around diabetes, of course, and they've been well received also. We're working on a new initiative with PharmDs, and we have Jamaica is our first one, but we just hired somebody new to work on our anticoagulation initiative. That's a whole different topic there. But what our plan is to have PharmDs for about, again, 3 or 4 offices at a PharmD split. We might even, looking in a way, we might do this regionally, almost in a medical neighborhood type situation, so that a PharmD would not just handle primary care, but would handle specialist and primary care in one region, but probably based around a hospital. Again, since we have 9 hospitals and we're geographically diverse, that might be a better way of doing it. So we're looking through at that now. The Care Opportunities outreach is similar to the Care Gaps program, reaching out to our patients proactively on their birthday, reminding them if they need any kind of health maintenance. CME for medical home meetings, we've obtained that for them, and also some Part 4 for the boards too with the medical home initiatives. And then the innovation calls I talked about earlier, which we've done 2 of those now, and we're going to move that forward probably monthly for different topics as we move forward there. So the 4 steps just change physician culture, because again, that's what we're doing here. When we're transforming care, we have to change how our providers are thinking and acting. And that sense of purpose, the guiding principles, again, this let it be physician-led and owned, that comes back to those PCPC committees, which I think has been a key to the success for this. And this is kind of interesting in number 3, it says it's not about the money. Optima had actually given an incentive, a cash incentive for the scorecards for our Wave 2 sites, the first 1 and Wave 2 sites, for their scorecards. And so it was like February or March, they actually got some checks. You know, it's not a whole lot of money, but it was just to help out. And the checks came to our office, and our providers said, "What are these for?" I said, "Well, those are your incentive checks." And so they didn't even know they were getting these bonus checks. They actually they improved their scorecards to green and yellow just because of the fact of physicians don't like red, they like green, they like yellow. And so they were doing it, and the money was kind of a nice little bonus at the end, but it wasn't the driver at all for this. It's not always money-driven, as Dan Pink would say. And then addressing physician isolation. This is a challenge here, too, and we're working on this with communication. Again, we're very widely spread geographically, and we have to really get our, as you all know, there's the islands of physicians scattered around in their little offices, and they have to think more in terms of a group culture, a community, population management, that we're going to be sharing all these patients amongst ourselves. So one of the other initiatives we're looking at is a electronic consult with our specialists. So instead of sending the patient physically over to a specialist, have an electronic consult back and forth. Within Epic, since we're all in the same e-care, the specialist can look at that, review the chart, say, well, no, I do need to see that patient, or no, this is what you need to do this test, do that test, do this. Saves a trip for the patient, too. So that's one of the things we're looking at also. And I guess that's it. So we'll stop there, and any questions that you might all have. Thank you. Sure.
How do you identify your pediatric patients?
It's Optima right now, so it's high utilizers, and they are Optima patients right now. We're actually looking at a Medicare Advantage program coming up where we're going to be going by STARS risk factors and acuity assessments down the line, and those patients can be brought in. But right now, it's basically our high utilizers with Optima. Yes.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Your e-visits or your video conferencing that you referred to as Skype-like, do you have a particular system that you're utilizing? Because we're talking about doing some of those same things, and we have concerns about the HIPAA and the security and encryption and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, the e-visits are done. Those aren't video right now. I think Epic is looking, with one of the new upgrades with pictures, but not a real-time Skype type thing. MD Live is a whole separate organization that's put together, and they're nationwide, and Centera has had a relationship with them, and that is they have the encryption down and everything there. Separate company completely, yes. Centera has a relationship with them, but that's a completely separate company, and they're nationwide right now. They're just starting, so you might not have heard of them yet, but they have providers all over the country that they credential that can get on and do an electronic visit. So if you're in Alaska and you have a sinus infection, you could get on MD Live and actually have a provider in Virginia Beach take care of you. Hooked into Epic. Yeah, that's our challenge. They're working on that because, again, I'm an Epic, so if I'm going to do and that's why e-visits are so great, everything's documented, but we don't want to have to double document. So if we're doing an MD Live visit, you don't have to go back and double document in Epic. So they are working on that now, that we can have the other thing I like, Epic has all our safety features in there. So when I'm on Epic, I know drug-to-drug interactions. I know I've got my health maintenance built up. If I put in a medication, it's going to show those safety features in there. And MD Live has their own section of that, but it's not the same. So yes, that's going to be a challenge, and we've had discussions with them already. Yes?
Would you address billing for an e-visit and liability to the specialist?
Well, the two, so we're not actually doing the specialists yet. We're working on that, because that is a question, and things that cover the specialist, this hallway consult issue type thing, is am I liable if I do this, so we're working on those issues, but it has to change. It can't, we just don't, again, we're dealing with population management, we're going to have to work on that. So the regular e-visits are just, primary care to patient, and, it's a very specific problem. It's conjunctivitis, it's a UTI, it's a sinus infection, it's something that's, what they've done and what we've done actually is build a series of questions that kicks a patient out if it's inappropriate for them to have an e-visit. So if it's conjunctivitis, you're going to rule out iritis, you're going to rule out any serious problems. If they answer yes to any of those questions, it kicks them out and they can't do an e-visit. The billing part of it is Optima, and that's, again, a challenge because e-visits aren't covered by most insurers nowadays. It's nice because we have our own insurance company, Optima, so we made a deal with them so they will cover it. But we're hoping that there's a lot of patients. This is a great patient satisfier, the e-visits are. There is reimbursement RVU for our providers, so it's a win-win for both of them. And we're hoping that as the word gets out, we'll put pressure on some of the other insurers to come on board and then start covering our e-visits. But we're just starting to get into the specialty primary care aspect of it. And, reimbursement would have to be, we might decide that this is just going to be, as being a specialist in Centera Medical Group, this is one of the things that you're going to provide. You're going to provide so many electronic consults, because one of our issues right now is access to our specialists. I mean, neurology and SMG, we're looking at 2 or 3 weeks out for a visit. So it can be, I think, a help for the specialists too. But that's just in its infancy right now.
You're doing a lot of change. What kind of change engine? Are you using Lean or Six Sigma, or do you have your own change processes and management?
At the SMG kind of corporate level, we've done that. Site to site, we haven't gone there. We actually talked about that just recently, about starting to do that and get it done at a site level to do some of the lean process. So with our physician development program, the leadership development program, they're going to be educated on that and try and start doing that to the site-to-site basis. But to answer the question, no, it's not done at a site level right now.
It's done by a process level, though, for a lot of our initiatives, using the lean.
A lot of things you said, we've used the lean, but the lean anything out of the lean process.
Right.
My question kind of tags on to that, too. You mentioned standardizing or removing barriers to the rooming. How did you get physicians to agree, or what sort of change mechanisms or arm twisting did you employ,
yes.
coercion, to get them to agree?
It was a challenge. In our office itself, I have a nurse practitioner working with myself very closely. So that was the first. The two of us just got together and we looked at our 2 rooming tools that we had, and we put that together and we decided on one. And then I had 2 other primary care providers in there, so I asked the tool that we got together, the 2 of us, I asked them to look at it and give me some feedback on that and what changes they would like to do. And then we put all that together, and then at one of our office meetings, we put it all down and went over it line by line. Do you all agree with this? Is there any changes or things like that? And so it was done with everybody. It wasn't saying this is the tool we're going to use. It was everybody had a say, and they could argue a little bit about why they like this and why they don't want shoes on or why they don't, this and that. And so I think that was, again, the idea, like this PCPC, that having the physician involved in making that. So then, now we have it at our office, now we got to move it to other offices. So you take our tool that's at our office, you share it with the new office, let them have feedback. If they want to tweak it and change it a little bit, sure, but then we change the overall tool to both those offices, and then that changes to the next office. So it might tweak a little bit as it goes, but overall, it really, it does turn out that as you move forward and forward, these little changes are not that significant.
So I have a question. When Optum identifies the 1,000 patients that you're going to review based on high cost, are they using some sort of predictive modeling?
I don't know.
And what is that predictive modeling?
Well, I don't know that they're using predictive modeling yet, which is one of the reasons why we're here this weekend. But I think it's all it's claims. They're looking at what's costing Optima the most money. So they're looking at claims as most. But again, it would be nice to be able to catch those patients who are going to be the high spenders, not the ones that are high spenders already. And that's what, so predictive modeling we're looking at from this state, but also, if we get into Medicare Advantage, how huge is that going to be? Because we got to catch those patients before they end up in the hospital. So that's going to be the wave of the future. But to answer your question, No, at this stage, it's all done by claims.
Okay. Can I ask another quick question? So as you're moving forward with your change, sort of incrementally for your physicians and your clinical teams, have your physicians accepted one template in Epic to document their visits in? This is a struggle that we're having, and we actually have an EMR medical director who's doing a great job, but it is a regular struggle because when we implemented Epic in 2006, Becky? 2007, what happened was they had a lot of opportunity to develop their own, and so now we're coming back to try to standardize and also standardize that visit so that the clinical team is doing the same thing across the board. And so are they using the same template?
Yes, that's what we're doing right now is putting out what we call the PEPC courses, Provider E-Care Proficiency Courses. And we've done this for a little while on Saturdays where we just have about 10 providers come in and we go through them and talk about filters and tips and tricks. And that was where it first started, but we're really transitioning that into workflow now. So what we're doing with these courses is trying to teach our providers the optimal workflow in the office with Epic, and that includes HPI smart phrases when you're talking about documentation, going over health maintenance every visit, every time, reviewing the medicines every visit, every time, the problem list. We just putting out a new best practice protocol for problem list etiquette, which problem lists are all over the place, so that's one of our big challenges is getting the problem list appropriate too. But we're going to actually take the PEPC courses on the road and go kind of site to site and do what you're talking about, really talk about workflow and Epic optimization. So what's the best practice? I mean, when I've done these courses, I've raise a hand, how many of you would do most of your documentation in the exam room? 5-10% do. And I ask the same question, how many of you spend 2 or 3 hours at night on the in-basket? Everybody raises their hand. And that's not the optimal way to do Epic. Epic is that you got to get your documentation done in the exam room. So that, yes, I feel your pain, but that's how we're trying to work on that.
Quick question here. Well, maybe not a quick question. So first off, I think you're addressing changing physician culture is huge, and I think it's very laudable. Great talk here. They say that culture eats strategy for lunch every day, so I think trying to go at that hard place. So my question is really, what would you say was the biggest hurdle to addressing physician culture? Is it time? Is it sort of togetherness? You sort of hinted there was lack of community and you were trying to get to that. Any certain things that were the hurdles as you looked at it?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I mean, it's, even though, well, as we started as a medical group, it was, you acquire these different little offices and they all have their own little individual culture and their own little islands of practice, and there wasn't a sense of group at all, pretty much. It was, we do it this way, this is the best. So the challenge is getting that, again, you're a part of a medical group and we can help you. And again, I think what really turned that around a lot was the PCPC, where they had a sense of say in something. It's not, as a physician specifically, you don't want to feel that, it's just all coming down on me, this is the way to do it, and it probably is the way to do it. But if they come at it, if they get together in a group and come out with the same thing that you were going to tell them, it goes a lot further that way. But it's still a challenge for us. I mean, still working on that group culture, and now we're going to population management from, another big step for providers. We're in the midst of our compensation change. As you saw, that's just 10% that's at risk now, and that's going to have to probably change too. We're going to have to increase our at-risk for the compensation. So that's another challenge. Yeah, we're definitely not there, trust me. But that's, I think, again, I've said it so many times, but that fact that you're really getting the physicians involved in the change process and letting them have a say in it, I think, is one of the biggest successes there.
As groups have moved towards team-based care, I've heard of a number of groups that had to go back and do some training in team dynamics. Have you found challenges in building teams? It's,
the huddle comes into play there, where we're talking about in our own little team, but yes, there are some challenges with that. We haven't formally got into team training that way. The Pioneer Guide, and you saw that one of those 7 initiatives was our huddle, and that's where we're trying to work with that. I think with the registries, having the secretary work the registries as a team, that also gets, I think, the secretaries more involved, and I think they have a more sense of ownership when they're calling the patients and saying, come in, you're not doing well. So we haven't done that formally, but I think that's as close as we come, is focusing on the huddles and getting the staff more involved that way. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and don't go too far because we've got a couple of data slides just to talk about, and hopefully that'll be a bit more discussion for just another few minutes, and then we'll go to a break. So let's see. Oh, it's okay. It's over there. All right. So we got to figure out where computer is. Removable disk. And this is it. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go through 3 data slides. Yay. So these represent the different waves they were talking about. So wave 1 occurred, well, I guess, so the top shows the patient counts of each of these waves, and each letter is a different site. And on the left, you can see the wave as an aggregate. So wave 1 occurred in end of 2010, beginning of 2011. Wave 2 in beginning of 2012. Wave 3 in the middle of 2012. Wave 4, end of 2012. And wave 5, beginning of 2013. So what you're looking at is the proportion of patients with their D3 measured. So you can see from site to site how many have complete D3 measurements. And it's interesting to see the variance by the waves. So from 97% to 83% in wave 3. And in wave 1, there's actually little variance because they've been there the longest. And wave 4, site K, is a site in implementation phase of new EHR, so that's why their data is so low. But you guys will be able to compare these to your groups tomorrow when we go over D3 control rates and stuff like that.
So does that make sense what we're looking at here? I want to make sure we're not doing this too rapidly, but it is kind of reassuring to see that, you know, the rates of measuring D3 completely are higher in the wave 1 sites, and then they're decreasing. There's some variance in the sites, among the sites in each of the waves, but it is kind of interesting that overall we are seeing that the people who've been at it longer are doing it a more complete job of measuring the D3.
And we're looking at type 2 diabetics 18 to 75 with at least 1 E&M visit in 2012. So now we'll look at control rate, and you can see, whereas measurement rate, there is that sort of relationship where the longer the PCMH, the more they're getting measured. When you look at control rate, it doesn't seem to have that relationship, which is pretty interesting. And within each wave, you can see there's a large amount of variance as far as the green proportion is people that have all their D3 in control. Use this. So then the yellow have 1 out of control, the orange have 2 out of control, and the brown have all 3 out of control. And this is, again, just looking at this blue proportion over here, so just the people that have complete measures. So you can see that there is no necessary relationship between being in a PCMH longer and being in control. Does that make sense? And then this is the last one. So this is looking at uncoded diabetes. So you can see the proportion in the gray are people that are in the cohort for having either a medication or a higher A1C, but don't necessarily have a diagnosis or a problem list. So wave 1 through 5 have extraordinary numbers as far as only a couple % don't have a diagnosis, and you guys will see where you guys compare to that tomorrow. But then their non-PCMH sites isn't as good, and I know from talking to Centara, all your PCMH sites are your family and internal medicine, so those are the non-PCMHs, more specialty and stuff like that. And yeah, so if you guys have any questions, that's the data. If that makes sense.
It seems like there's a tiny untouchable proportion there that you're approaching the limit on. Any theories on that? Why? I don't know. I mean, that might be a data thing. I'm not sure. Maybe patient confusion that the test done. But it is hard to get people to come in for fast analytics and things like that. So, but it's a good question. We should look at which of the things in our untouchable proportion are missing, and actually we'll do some of that tomorrow. That's part of understanding where the opportunity is, and we'll break it down a little bit tomorrow. But it's interesting that the process measures, getting the D3 measured and getting the diagnosis code or getting a problem list entry, that seems to be related to being part of this design initiative that is PCMH. The measurement, or the control rates, we haven't seen yet. Thanks. And the control rates, we aren't seeing quite that same relationship. So I think that's an interesting thing as well. And it could be that it's a function of time. Although this is the wave one has been at it for a couple of years. So there's a real, but just interesting. And we'll talk more about breaking down opportunity tomorrow, and then how you can, within your own data, look at each of these things in Mindshare.
And I can tell you very quickly, if you look at the uncoded patients versus the coded patients as far as measurements and control, there's a huge difference in that patients that are coded, which makes perfect sense, get measured much more often and are much more likely to be in control. Thank you. So
other sort of final questions on the topic of PCMH. I think we've had tremendously rich information from many groups. I want to thank everybody who has helped either different levels of formality, but all contributing to a perspective on PCMH. Let me mention a couple of things. Adrian had asked, we should understand exactly who's on each of the EHRs, and there is on your table a list, and there should be enough copies for everybody. There should be a list of... Oh, I'm sorry. It's on the front table. There are two lists. One is a list of the participating medical groups in NCETA, and we have the EHR, and we have some other data. We have very old numbers for how many physicians are part of Centera Medical Group. We have 385 there, and it's now 600 and maybe 650 and maybe 667. So we'll have to update this tomorrow. But so please help us update these because I think this kind of reference, and this of course will be on the web portal for you to be able to identify other folks on the same, and that's part of the whole purpose of the web portal is networking it in between meetings. We also have a list of all of the people who are here and the registration information, sort of name and position and medical groups. So it's kind of nice to have a written list, and we do have those for you. Cindy?
So just to kind of change up a little bit of thinking, add some levity to the meeting, we're going to show you a series of videos, and this one's coming to us just a few minutes ago. Dr. Rawlinson made a recommendation, kind of help set the theme, what we're focused on here. Once the video is done, we have a break. We'll be back in here at 9:45 with a presentation from Dr. Mark Jaffe with Kaiser.
Are you ready, Jerry? I'm ready. I want to make sure you're ready. Brother, here it is. Show me the data. Data!
Jerry, does that make me feel good just to say that? Say it with me one time, Jerry.
Show you the data.
No, you can do better than that, Jerry. I want you to say it with me, brother.
I I got Dr. Oz on the other line. I bet he can say it.
Yeah. No, show you the data.
No, not show you. Show me the data.
Show me the data.
Yeah. Louder.
Show me the data.
That's it, brother, but you got to yell.
Show me the data.
I need to feel you, Jerry.
Show me the data.
Jerry, you better yell.
Show me the data. Show me the data.
I love people having their data.
I love people having their data. Show me the data. I love data.
Congratulations, you're still my doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Ellington. John. Thank you.
Sure. So we are talking oral. Are you?
I'm going to pull it up.